Esotericism. Looking now at esoteric schools and the idea of esotericism in general, there is an immense amount of literature connected with esoteric schools that has existed at different periods of history. Ordinary history, as we know, is nothing more than a history of crime and violence. If you open any book on history, you will find nothing of esoteric history. On occasion, P.D. Ouspensky would note that the overcoming of violence is our final aim, that all negative emotions that engender so many evil consequences, not only among individual people, but in a national sense as well, these emotions all display in the form of violence. Violence is not a thing that can be overcome in the short term, simply because we desire it. To understand that, one could take by example what can be referred to as the beginning of violence. In a Sufi school of esotericism that emerged after the demise of the Prophet Muhammad, and worked on the Holy Quran, in fact rendering an entirely different explanation of the Quran, there was a mystical poet by the name of Sa'di. As a youth, Sa'di was very religious in the ordinary sense of the word, and on one occasion when the Holy Quran was being read to a class of followers, he turned to his father and said that he noticed many of the boys went to sleep, thinking this was very bad. His father said to him, "So all you have got from this reading of the Quran is nothing but finding fault with others? I assure you, my son, it would have been better had you been asleep like those boys you criticize." Perhaps we cannot perceive in this the beginning of violence, failing to grasp what is implied by the parent. Is intolerance the beginning of violence? Is feeling that you are better than others the beginning of violence? If we feel that we are better than others, superior to our fellow humans in the wrong way, this can indeed bring about violence and oppression. Herein lies the opportunity for deep reflection and a long path of understanding. Recall from earlier commentaries an old esoteric symbol of the lion, with its paws cut off. Violence comes from thinking that one can do, and violence always breeds violence, which means that everything that we do from violence passes into the world both as a triad and as an octave that can only produce the reaction of violence. We see in our age violence begetting violence all over the world. We see the law, a tooth for a tooth, exemplified in every direction of life. We see violence creating violence, violent machines creating newer, bigger and more capable machines of mass destruction. The Christ said, "Ye have heard that it was said of old time, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, resist not him that is evil." It is impossible to understand this saying except on the scale of ourselves. On the scale of life it is a different matter as far as we are concerned. But on the scale of ourselves, it is something that we can begin to comprehend practically once we understand that violence always arises from a feeling of superiority and believing that we are better than others. Sa'di thought that he was better than others. He congratulated himself on his virtue. We will always become violent if we feel intolerant of others in the wrong way. If we take it for granted that we are better. More consciously, we may see where we are better off, without feeling the violence of intolerance. We can examine different schools later, the remains of which are incorporated into surviving literature. However, for now we can reflect that all thinking that can be done turns violent very easily. We are not the initiators, we are not the creators of anything, and simply causal links in a chain of reaction. Such as we are simply machines, mechanisms that are influenced, guided, controlled and manipulated by higher influences. In this lies the root of frustration, of assuming that it is we that actually do things. Recall the 11th chapter of Genesis where it is said at the opening, "And the whole earth was of one language and one speech." This means there was a time, which George Gurdjieff referred to, an era when people under the influence of esotericism were all one, and so had a common form of communication. In this regard, Gurdjieff once said that when esotericism had central control during that short time, everyone was taught to write toward the center of government, geographically speaking, which seems to indicate this as the reason why we write as it were from left to right, while other nations from right to left or from below upwards and so on, dependent upon geographic location, culture and tradition. We can reflect upon the idea that there was once some central form of government quite different from anything we know today, in which all nations were under one jurisdiction, and always wrote towards it. Returning to that ideal state of humanity, examining the scraps of an ancient teaching left to us in recorded history, we can see what happened. Those ancients began to think they could do. They identified with their knowledge and understanding, as humanity inevitably does when we begin to fall asleep. Then so the account goes on to say, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, that they found a valley and they dwelt there. This means that they strayed away from esoteric teaching, which is of the east, and they went down to a lower level, the valley, which means a diminished understanding, and a lower state of being. They there began to build. Notice how they built. And they had brick for stone and slime they had for mortar. We already know that stone represents truth on a certain level, something rock solid, a foundation and so on. However, they made brick instead of stone, meaning they invented their own truth, substituting man-made truth for esoteric truth, and so building a city and a tower that brought them under the wrath of God, which means the laws of esotericism. They said they would build a tower that could reach up to heaven. This means they presumed they could overcome esoteric truth, or the Word of God as John calls it. They degenerated into self-worship, the aggrandizement of their own understanding, and so thought they could do. Thought they could create, that they could initiate, that they had become sources and progenitors, that they actually possessed control over everything. Science and mathematics today have given us the idea that we can do. However, psychologically, we are all connected with some other medium with which this work is concerned, and to which we can become gradually more sensitive. The objective of these commentaries is to keep alive that teaching of the work of esotericism, in spite of all that goes on in a world of violence. That is the meaning of refuge, an oasis or a safe space. Whether we appreciate refuge or not depends upon our understanding of the work. In work we think differently, we talk of different things, we keep alive something that does not depend upon the pendulum of violence. This work teaches that the Absolute is under one law, the law of its own will. From it proceeds creation by the first trinity of forces which create the first order of worlds under three laws, which is sometimes referred to as World 3. In tracing the ray of creation to the planet Earth, we have next our galaxy under 6 laws, our solar system as a minute part of the galaxy under 12 laws, our planetary system as a whole under 24 laws, our home, the Earth as part of those planets and so falling under 48 laws, and our moon as part of the Earth coming under 96 laws. Understand that the part is always under more laws than the whole. For it is necessary to see this by finding our own examples, i.e., a soldier is under the laws of the captain under the laws of the colonel, and so on. Then the whole army falls under the law of a general. Does man put himself under more laws in war? Does the common movement of things today tend to put us all under more and more laws? Will this make it possible for anyone to reach their essence more easily, or will we tend to become more mechanical, more like an android or a cyborg? Are ants and bees under more laws than we are? Have they any individual chance of development? The more laws that we put ourselves under, the more can it be said that we fall under the law of accident, chance and happenstance. In all of these commentaries, it is possible to grasp that personality falls under more laws than essence. Essence is under planetary laws at the note fa in the ray of creation, or rather the note si in the side octave, with both notes being at the same level in scale. Behind essence lies real I, which is under 12 laws, and corresponds diagrammatically to the level represented by the sun. This means that essence is above personality in the scale of being, and that real I is above essence. Psychologically, essence is internal to personality, and real I lies internal to essence. What is more internal is higher in scale, or a more rapid frequency, which we can conclude is either internal or finer, because both terms in this context have the same meaning.